The weight of what was. The desert doesn't forgive. It remembers every man who walks through it, every choice made under its relentless sun, every word spoken when the wind is the only witness. And sometimes, when the light fades and the cold settles in like judgment itself, a man finds that the desert has been keeping score all along. Samuel Ward knew this. He had known it for 7 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Not that he counted anymore. Not that counting changed anything. But the number was there, carved into some part of him that wouldn't let go, wouldn't soften, wouldn't allow him the mercy of forgetting. He rode into Seneca Flats on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, when the heat had finally broken, and the sky held that particular shade of blue that made everything beneath it look smaller, more fragile. The town was like 100 others he'd passed through, wooden buildings bleached gray by sun and time. A single street of packed dirt, faces that turned away the moment they registered the gun on his hip and the emptiness in his eyes. He wasn't looking for trouble. Hadn't been looking for it in years. But trouble had a way of finding men like him anyway, not because they sought it, but because they carried it with them like a shadow that stretched too long in the afternoon light. The saloon was called the Gilded Rose, though there was nothing gilded about it and no roses anywhere in sight. Just another name meant to promise something better than what existed. Samuel tied his horse to the rail outside, felt the animal's exhaustion in the way it stood, head low, breathing steady. 7 days they'd been riding. 7 days since the last town, the last well, the last conversation that wasn't with himself. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of spilled whiskey that had soaked into the floorboards over years. A piano sat silent in the corner, keys yellowed like old teeth. 3 men played cards at a table near the window. A bartender with silver hair and a face like worn leather polished a glass that would never come clean. Samuel took a stool at the far end of the bar, away from the light, away from eyes. "Whiskey," he said. His voice sounded strange. He hadn't used it in days. The bartender poured without comment, slid the glass across wood, scarred with initials and forgotten names. Samuel didn't drink it right away, just looked at it. Amber liquid catching the dim light from the window, holding it there like something precious. "Passing through?" the bartender asked. Not friendly, not unfriendly. Just the question that bartenders asked when a stranger sat down. "Always am," Samuel said. The old man nodded, understood something in those 2 words that didn't need explaining. There were men who stayed and men who moved. Samuel was the second kind, had been since Leadville, since the day that divided his life into before and after. He lifted the glass, felt the burn, welcomed it. The card players were laughing now, that easy laughter of men who still believed life could be predictable, who still thought tomorrow would come without cost. Samuel remembered that laughter, had owned it once, back when he'd been younger, before he learned that some choices don't just change your path, they change who you are in ways you can't undo. "You look like a man carrying something heavy." The voice came from his left. Samuel turned his head slowly, saw a woman sitting 3 stools down. She was perhaps 40, perhaps older. Hard to tell in this light, in this life. Her dress was faded calico, her hands work-roughened, her eyes clear in a way that suggested she'd seen enough to stop being surprised by men like him. "Most men are," Samuel said. "True enough," she smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that acknowledged weight without trying to lift it. But some carry it different. Some carry it like punishment. Samuel looked back at his glass. "Maybe that's what it is. You got a name?" "Used to." She laughed at that, soft and genuine. "Don't we all?" She stood, smoothed her dress, took a step closer, but not close enough to intrude. "I'm Mary. Run the boarding house 2 doors down. You need a room. I got one. Clean bed, no questions. Appreciate it. Supper's at 6. You're welcome at the table if you want. You're welcome to eat alone if you don't." She left before he could answer, and he was grateful for that. Grateful that she understood the kind of space a man like him needed. He finished his drink, ordered another, let the afternoon fade into evening, while the saloon slowly filled with miners. Ranch hands, men whose faces carried the same dust and weariness that he knew lived in his own. Nobody bothered him. Nobody asked his business. In towns like this, you learn not to. When the light through the window turned gold, and then orange, and then something darker, Samuel paid his tab and walked the short distance to Mary's boarding house. It was a 2-story structure that leaned slightly to the left, as if tired of standing straight. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Rooms clean and decent." Mary showed him upstairs to a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the empty land beyond town. The room smelled of lye soap and sun-dried linen. "Supper in 20 minutes if you want it," she said. "I'll come down." She nodded and left him there. Samuel stood at the window, watching the last light drain from the sky. Out there, somewhere in all that emptiness, was the man he used to be. A deputy marshal, 26 years old, confident in his aim, confident in the law, confident that right and wrong were clear enough to navigate by. That man was gone. What remained was this drifter who hired his gun to protect payrolls and stage shipments, who moved from town to town taking jobs that required him to stand between other people, his money, and the men who wanted to take it. Not because he believed in the money or the men who owned it, but because standing in that space meant he didn't have to think about anything else, didn't have to feel anything else. He washed his face in the basin, let the cold water run down his neck, soaking the collar of his shirt. In the small mirror above the washstand, he barely recognized himself. His hair had gone gray at the temples, though he was only 33. Lines cut deep around his eyes and mouth. His jaw carried a permanent tension that no amount of whiskey could loosen. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in years. Because he hadn't. Downstairs, the dining room held a long table set with mismatched plates and cups. 4 other boarders were already seated, a young couple who looked newly married, an older man with a prospector's sun-damaged skin, and a boy of perhaps 14 who kept his eyes down and ate like someone unused to regular meals. Mary brought out plates of beef stew, thick bread, coffee that smelled better than it probably tasted. The kind of meal that reminded you that survival was still a form of grace. "Samuel Ward," Mary said, gesturing to him as he took a seat at the far end. "Passing through. Folks, this is Mr. Ward." They nodded. He nodded back. Nobody asked where he was from or where he was going. That kind of courtesy was common in places where half the people had something to run from and the other half had learned not to ask. The stew was good. Simple, but good. Samuel ate slowly, listening to the low conversation around him. The young husband worked at the assay office. His wife was pregnant, just beginning to show. The prospector talked about a claim he was working 15 miles north, convinced this time would be different. This time he'd find color that mattered. The boy said nothing at all, just ate with the focused intensity of hunger that went deeper than one missed meal. "You looking for work?" a prospector asked Samuel after a while. "Depends. I could use a hand working the claim. Pays fair." Samuel shook his head. Not that kind of work. The prospector understood, went back to his stew without offense. After supper, Samuel helped Mary clear the plates, a gesture that seemed to surprise her. They worked in silence, stacking dishes, wiping the table. When they were done, she poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from him. "You don't talk much," she said. "Not much to say, or too much." She sipped her coffee, studied him over the rim of the cup. "A man comes through here quiet as you. Usually he's carrying one of 2 things, a secret or a regret. What if it's both? Then he's carrying a heavier load than most." Samuel wrapped his hands around the warm cup, let the heat settle into his palms. Outside, the night had come down complete, turning the windows into mirrors that reflected the room back at itself. "I was a lawman once," he heard himself say. The words came out before he could stop them, pulled up from some place he usually kept locked. Deputy Marshal, Colorado Territory. Town called Leadville. Mary didn't say anything, just waited. "We got word that a man named Frank Degnan was hiding in a cabin outside town, wanted for robbery, assault, maybe worse. My partner and I rode out to bring him in." Samuel paused, the memory rising like smoke. It was winter. Snow coming down so hard you could barely see 10 feet ahead. "We surrounded the cabin, called for him to come out. He stopped." Mary waited. There was gunfire. Hard to tell who shot first in all that snow and wind. But when it was over, Samuel's voice went flat, empty of everything except the facts. When it was over, there was a woman dead on the cabin floor, 22 years old. Degnan's wife. She'd been standing behind the door when the shooting started. The coffee had gone cold in his hands. "I don't know if it was my bullet or my partner's. We both fired. The inquest couldn't determine which gun killed her. Ruled it justified. Said she was harboring a wanted man, that the shooting was in the line of duty. But you don't believe that. I believe she's dead. I believe I helped make her dead. And I believe justified doesn't mean the same thing as right." Mary reached across the table, placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm, calloused, real. "You carry that every day," she said. Not a question. "Every day. And your partner?" "He kept wearing the badge. Told me to let it go, that it was part of the job, that you can't do this work without hard choices." Samuel looked at Mary's hand on his, wondered how long it had been since anyone had touched him with kindness. "I turned in my badge the next morning. Been moving ever since. Moving away or moving toward. Don't know that there's a difference anymore." They sat like that for a while. Two people who understood that some wounds don't heal, they just become part of your landscape. Eventually Mary stood, squeezed his shoulder once, and left him alone at the table. Samuel went back to his room, lay on the bed fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep would come late if it came at all. It always did. Because the moment he closed his eyes, he was back in that cabin doorway, snow swirling, gun raised, and the sound of a shot that could have been his or could have been someone else's, but in the end made no difference because she was still just as dead. Her name had been Catherine. He'd learned that later. Catherine Degnan. Married 8 months. No children. Worked as a seamstress in Leadville before she married Frank. People said she was kind. Sighed she sang in the church choir. Said she probably didn't even know what her husband had done. Samuel had gone to her funeral. Stood in the back, hat in his hands, while they lowered her into frozen ground. Her mother had been there, bent nearly double with grief. Her father stood like a stone, face locked in an expression that looked like rage and sorrow combined into something harder than either one alone. That's when Samuel knew he couldn't keep the badge. Because justified or not, legal or not, that woman was in the ground, and he'd helped put her there. And no amount of law or duty or necessity could make that weight lighter. Morning came slow and reluctant, the way it does when you've spent the night wrestling with memory. Samuel rose with the first gray light, washed, dressed, went downstairs. Mary was already in the kitchen, working dough for bread, her hands moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. "Coffee's on the stove," she said without turning around. He poured a cup, stood by the window watching the street wake up. A wagon rolled past. A dog trotted by with purpose. The sky was clear, promising another hot day. "You staying?" Mary asked. "Day or two. Need to rest the horse. You're welcome as long as you need." He turned to look at her. "Why are you kind to me?" She stopped kneading, wiped flour from her hands on her apron. "Because I can see you're kind to yourself, hardly at all. Figure someone ought to be. Before Samuel could respond, the front door burst open, and the young husband from last night stumbled in, face pale, words tumbling out in a rush. "Mary, you need to come. It's Sarah. The baby, something's wrong." Mary was already moving, wiping her hands, calling for Samuel to fetch the doctor 2 streets over. Samuel ran, his body remembering this kind of urgency, even if his heart had gone numb to most everything else. The doctor was an older man named Hendricks, gray-bearded and perpetually tired-looking. He grabbed his bag without questions, followed Samuel back to the boarding house, where Mary had already taken the young woman upstairs. Samuel waited in the dining room with the husband, whose name he learned was Thomas. The young man paced, hands shaking, repeating, "She be fine, she be fine," like a prayer he was trying to convince himself was true. "First child?" Samuel asked. "Yes, we only been married 7 months. Came out here because I got the job at the assay office. Thought we'd make a new start, you know, away from her family, my family. Just us." Samuel knew that impulse. The belief that geography could solve what was broken inside you. The hope that somewhere else you'd be someone else. "She's strong?" Samuel asked. "Strongest person I know. But she's scared. I can see it, and I don't know what to do. Don't know how to help her. You're here. That's something." Thomas stopped pacing, looked at Samuel with eyes too young for the fear in them. "You got kids?" "No." "Ever been married?" "No. Why not?" The question was innocent, just conversation to fill the awful waiting. But Samuel felt it land somewhere deep. "Because I didn't want to bring anyone into what I carry," he said. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding something in that, even if he didn't understand all of it. They waited. An hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher. Sounds from upstairs movement, low voices, once a cry that made Thomas go rigid before Mary's voice came calm and steady, speaking words they couldn't make out, but whose tone was meant to reassure. Finally, near midday, Dr. Hendricks came down. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his face was drawn, but his eyes were gentle. "She's all right," he said. "Baby came early, but everything's all right. You got a son." Thomas made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He started for the stairs, but Hendricks stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "Give them a few minutes. Mary's getting them settled. Then you can go up." When Thomas finally went upstairs, Samuel stood and began to leave, but Hendricks called after him. "You the one who came for me?" "Yes." Fast thinking. "Another hour, and I don't know that it would have ended this well." The doctor studied him. "You're the man staying here. Ward, is it?" "Yes. Heard about you. Word travels. People say you were a lawman once." Samuel didn't answer. "People also say you're fast with that gun, that you hire out to protect shipments." "I do what I'm asked when the price is fair." Hendricks nodded. "Town council's been talking about hiring someone. We've had problems. Stage got robbed last month. Mine payroll was hit before that. Nothing violent yet, but people are nervous. They want someone who knows how to handle trouble before it gets out of hand. I'm not a lawman anymore. Didn't say you were. But maybe you're someone who could help keep people safe. Maybe that's worth something." Samuel looked at the old doctor, saw in his face a kind of weariness that came from trying to heal what kept getting broken. "I'll think about it," Samuel said. That night, Mary let Samuel hold the baby for a moment. The child was impossibly small, wrapped tight in a blanket that had been washed so many times it was soft as cloud. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful in a way that made Samuel's chest tighten with something he couldn't name. "You're good with him," Mary said, "just standing still. That's all. That's more than nothing." Samuel handed the baby back carefully, terrified of his own strength, of what damage could be done through carelessness or misjudgment. The child made a small sound, settled again into sleep. Upstairs, Thomas sat beside his wife's bed, holding her hand, looking at her like she'd personally hung the moon and painted the stars. Sarah was pale but smiling, exhausted but radiant with something Samuel recognized as pure, uncomplicated joy. They had no idea what was coming. No idea how hard it would be to raise a child in this place, to keep him safe, to give him a chance at something better than just survival. But they had hope, and Samuel realized, standing there watching them, that hope was what he'd lost somewhere back in that cabin doorway in the snow. The ability to believe that tomorrow might be better, that choices mattered, that redemption was possible. He'd been living like a dead man for 7 years, just moving through days without expecting them to add up to anything. But maybe Hendricks was right. Maybe there was still something he could do that mattered. The next morning, Samuel found the doctor at his office and told him he'd take the job, not as a marshal, not as law, just as someone hired to watch, to be present, to maybe prevent what didn't need to happen. The town council met him that afternoon. 5 men who owned the bank, the general store, the largest ranch, the mining operation, the freight company. Men with assets to protect and enough money to pay someone to do it. They offered him a fair wage, a room at the boarding house, and ammunition for his gun. In return, they wanted him to ride escort on payroll shipments, to be visible in town, to discourage the kind of men who saw opportunity in other people's hard work. Samuel took the job, not because he needed the money, though he did. Not because he wanted to stay in one place, though part of him was tired of moving. But because maybe, just maybe, if he could keep someone else from dying, it would balance the ledger even a fraction. He knew it didn't work that way. Knew that Catherine Degnan's death couldn't be undone by saving someone else. But he also knew he had to try, had to do something other than just carry the weight and wait for it to crush him. So he stayed. The first few weeks were quiet. Samuel rode escort on 3 payroll runs without incident. He walked the streets at evening, visible but not intrusive, letting his presence speak for itself. He ate supper at Mary's table, listened to the other boarders, learned the rhythm of the town. Thomas named his son Samuel. When Samuel heard that, he didn't know what to say, felt honored and unworthy in equal measure. "You saved them," Thomas said when he saw Samuel's discomfort. "You ran for the doctor. You didn't have to do that. Anyone would have. But you did. And I want my son to carry the name of someone who showed up when it mattered." Samuel thought about that later, lying in his room as the night pressed against the window. Showed up when it mattered. As if that was enough? As if one right action could somehow outweigh a wrong one. But maybe it wasn't about outweighing. Maybe it was just about continuing to show up, day after day, doing what you could with what you had. Not because it erased what came before, but because it was all you had to offer. The trouble came on a Thursday in late October. Word reached town that a gang was working the territory. 4 men, maybe 5, hitting targets sporadically enough to avoid a pattern, but frequently enough to make people nervous. They'd robbed a ranch house near Silver Creek, killed a man who tried to resist, hit a stage near Copper Bend, took the strongbox, and left the passengers shaken but alive. They were moving unpredictable, dangerous. The town council called Samuel in. "We want you to take precautions," said Garrett, the man who owned the bank. "Keep extra watch on shipments. Maybe we hold off moving the mine payroll until this blows over." Samuel shook his head. Holding off just delays the problem. They'll wait, or they'll hit something else. Better to move it as planned, but with more men. How many more? 4, maybe 5. Good men who can handle themselves. Garrett looked uncertain. That's expensive. So is getting robbed. They agreed to his terms. Samuel recruited carefully. 2 ranch hands who'd worked cattle drives and knew how to stay calm under pressure. A former soldier named Caleb, who'd mustered out after the war and settled in the territory. And the prospector, whose name was Hiram, who despite his age could still shoot straight and had lived long enough to develop good instincts about danger. They planned the route carefully, decided to move the payroll on a Monday morning early before most people were awake. 2 wagons, one carrying the money, one empty as a decoy. Samuel would ride ahead, Caleb behind, the others flanking. The night before, Mary made a large supper. Everyone at the table could feel the tension, though nobody spoke it directly. Thomas held his son, as if proximity could protect him. Sarah smiled, but her eyes were worried. "You be careful," Mary said to Samuel when the others had gone upstairs. "Plan to. I mean it. You've been here almost 2 months now. People have gotten used to you. That baby upstairs carries your name. You can't just get yourself killed and leave that to mean nothing." Samuel looked at her, saw the genuine concern in her face, and felt something shift in his chest. A loosening, slight but real. "I'll come back," he said. "Promise?" He almost didn't. Almost explained that promises were things he stopped making because he learned how easily they could be broken through no fault of your own. But Mary was looking at him like she needed to hear it, like she needed to believe that showing up mattered and that people could be counted on. "I promise," he said. Monday morning came cold and clear. Samuel and his crew assembled at the freight office before dawn. The payroll was loaded into the strongbox, secured in the wagon, covered with canvas. The decoy wagon was prepared identically. "Remember," Samuel told them, "if there's trouble, nobody plays hero. We're here to protect the payroll, but not at the cost of dying for someone else's money. You see a way out, you take it." They rode out as the sun broke the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber that looked almost kind in the early light. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. The road stretched empty ahead and behind. The horses moved steady. The wheels creaked their familiar rhythm. Samuel scanned the landscape constantly, looking for high ground, for places where ambush would make sense, for dust trails that might indicate riders. He saw none of it, which made him more nervous, not less. They were 10 miles from town when Caleb called out a warning. Riders ahead. 4 of them, spread across the road in a line. Samuel raised his hand, bringing the wagons to a halt. His crew closed ranks, hands moving to weapons but not drawing them yet. The riders approached slowly, stopping about 30 yards out. 3 men and a woman, all armed, all watching with the kind of focus that comes from practice. One of the men urged his horse forward a few steps. He was maybe 40, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. His voice when he spoke was calm, almost friendly. "Morning, gentlemen. Nice day for a ride." Samuel didn't answer. "We're going to need you to hand over that strongbox. Real simple. You give it to us, you ride away, everyone goes home alive." "Can't do that," Samuel said. The scarred man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sure you can. It's easy. You just don't. We're hired to protect that box. That's what we're going to do. You're hired to get paid. Hard to spend money when you're dead." Samuel felt the tension in his crew, felt them waiting for his lead. He kept his voice level, calm. "You kill us, you'll have every lawman in the territory hunting you. Right now you've stolen money. You kill 5 men for it, that becomes something else. Something that doesn't end well." The scarred man considered this. For a moment, Samuel thought he might back down. Then the woman spoke up. "We didn't ride all this way for conversation, Nat." Nat, apparently that was his name, nodded slowly. "Suppose we didn't?" He looked back at Samuel. "Last chance. The box or your lives." Samuel's hand moved to his gun, not drawing but ready. "You'll have to take it." For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind pushed against them, carrying the smell of dust and sage. A hawk circled overhead, indifferent to the drama below. Then one of the other riders, younger and more nervous than the rest, reached for his gun. Samuel drew and fired in one motion. hitting the young man in the shoulder, spinning him out of his saddle. Chaos erupted. Caleb fired, hitting one of the other riders. The woman wheeled her horse, shooting as she moved. Samuel felt a bullet pass close enough to his head that he heard it. He fired again, aiming for the horses now, trying to scatter them, trying to create confusion that would let his crew break for cover. Hiram took a round in the leg, toppled from his horse with a cry. One of the ranch hands, Samuel couldn't see which, went down hard. Samuel emptied his revolver, reloaded behind the wagon, came up firing. The scarred man, Nat, was still mounted, still shooting, his face locked in concentration. Samuel aimed carefully, squeezed the trigger. Nat jerked backward, clutched his side, but stayed in the saddle. He looked at Samuel with something like surprise, then turned his horse and rode hard, the woman following. The remaining uninjured rider grabbed the reins of the young man's horse and dragged him away, leaving dust and blood behind. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. Samuel ran to Hiram, who was bleeding but conscious, cursing steadily in a way that suggested he'd live. The ranch hand who'd gone down was dead, a bullet through his chest, his eyes still open and staring at a sky that no longer meant anything to him. His name had been Marcus, 24 years old, saved his money to buy his own place someday. Samuel knelt beside him, closed his eyes gently. Caleb appeared at his shoulder. They're gone. Took their wounded and ran. We need to get back to town. Hiram needs a doctor. They rigged a travois for Hiram, wrapped Marcus in canvas, and made the slow journey back to Seneca Flats. Samuel rode ahead, arriving hours before the others, going straight to Hendricks. Gunfight on the payroll run. One dead, one wounded. Wounded's coming in now. Hendricks grabbed his bag, moved fast for a man his age. When the wagons arrived, half the town came out to watch. They unloaded Hiram, carried him to the doctor's office. They took Marcus to the undertaker, his canvas shroud already darkening with blood that had seeped through. Samuel gave his report to the town council. Factual, detailed, flat. You did what you had to, Garrett said. But Samuel wasn't listening anymore. He was thinking about Marcus, about his mother, who lived somewhere in Kansas and would receive a letter saying her son was dead protecting someone else as money, about the life he'd wanted to build and never would. Another name for the ledger, another weight to carry. That night, Samuel sat alone in his room. Didn't go down to supper, didn't want to see anyone. Just sat in the dark, feeling the years pile up behind him, feeling the distance between who he'd wanted to be and who he'd become. A soft knock on the door. Samuel, Mary's voice. I'm all right. No, you're not. I'm coming in. She entered without waiting for permission, carrying a plate of food and a cup of coffee. Set them on the small table, then sat on the edge of the bed, looking at him in the shadows. You did what you could, she said. Wasn't enough. It never is. That's the hell of it. You can do everything right, and people still die. But that doesn't mean you stop trying. Samuel looked at her. How do you live with that, knowing nothing you do is enough? By doing it anyway, by showing up, by making the next meal, opening the door to the next stranger, offering the next kindness. Not because it fixes what's broken, but because it's all we've got. She stood, touched his shoulder lightly, left him alone. Samuel didn't sleep that night. Instead, he thought about Catherine Degnan, about Marcus, about all the people who died in his proximity, whether by his hand or his failure to prevent it. And he thought about the baby upstairs, named Samuel, about Thomas and Sarah trying to build a life in this hard place, about Mary showing kindness to broken people day after day without expecting it to fix anything. Maybe that was the answer. Not redemption, not absolution, not some moment where the scales balanced and the weight lifted, just the decision to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep offering whatever small thing you had, even when you knew it would never be enough. The desert doesn't forgive, but maybe it allows you to continue anyway, carrying what you carry, doing what you can, hoping that somewhere in the accumulation of small attempts at rightness, there's something that matters. Samuel rose with the dawn, washed, dressed, went downstairs. Mary had breakfast ready. She poured him coffee without comment, set a plate in front of him. "Thank you," he said. She understood he wasn't just talking about the food. The town buried Marcus that afternoon. Samuel stood at the graveside with his hat in his hands, listening to words about courage and sacrifice that sounded hollow but were offered with good intent. Marcus's friends were there, their faces showing the realization that this could have been any of them, that death was never as far away as they wanted to believe. After the service, Samuel walked to the edge of town, looked out at the desert, stretching forever in every direction. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of red and gold that made the land look almost beautiful despite its harshness. He thought about leaving, about saddling his horse and riding until Seneca Flats was just another town behind him, about going back to moving, to never staying long enough for anyone to name a child after him or expect him to come back. But he didn't move, because Mary was right. This was all they had, the showing up, the trying, the offering of small kindnesses and protections that would never be sufficient, but were still somehow necessary. Samuel turned back toward town, toward the boarding house with its leaning walls and clean rooms, toward the dining table where people gathered and tried to make sense of living in a place that didn't promise much beyond the next day. He would stay, not because it erased Catherine Degnan or brought Marcus back, not because it made him less haunted or his past less heavy, but because a baby carried his name now, because Mary believed people were worth showing up for, because somewhere in the act of continuing despite everything, there might be something that resembled purpose if you looked at it from the right angle, in the right light. The desert doesn't forgive, but it allows you to walk through it anyway, one step after another, carrying what you must, offering what you can, hoping that the journey itself might mean something even if you never reach a destination that feels like home. Samuel walked back into town as the last light faded, toward whatever came next, still haunted but no longer entirely alone.